Well, good evening, all you happy people. I'm Dr. Sampson. I'm the pilot coordinator for this project with the Gerald R. Ford Museum and the Kettering Foundation. And we're going to have some opening remarks from Elaine Didier, who is the director of the Gerald R. Ford Museum and Library. Elaine?
Hi, everybody. Hi. You're so far away. That's right. You're going to be put on stage in just a moment. Well, it's my pleasure to serve as the bifurcated, bi-coastal director of the only presidential library in the United States of America that is 130 miles apart, the two sites. The library's in Ann Arbor, and here's your first quickie quiz of the day. Do you know why there's a Ford Library in Ann Arbor and why there's a Ford Museum in Grand Rapids? Okay, who knows? Yes, ma'am. And he had actually already been giving his papers to the university. They're pretty devious over there. We know that, even though I'm a three-time grad. Anyway, I didn't get it right the first two times, so they made me go back and do it again. But at any rate, he'd been giving his congressional papers since 1962 to the Bentley Historical Collections at the University of Michigan. And then when he became vice president and then president, the university was interested, of course, in having a presidential library on campus. And meanwhile, the good citizens who he had served so ably for 25 years in Congress from Grand Rapids and from this region wanted to have a museum. So what we have are 22 million pages of documents. Think about that, 22 million pages of documents, and 500,000 audiovisual items are at the library, and that's really the research center, and scholars come from around the world, and high school students too. We have AP students and other classes come and work on projects in the Ford papers, so that invitation is open to you as well. And then over here we have, now the number is around 17,000 artifacts, some on display in the collections in the museum itself, and then of course a wonderful collection storage area, and we preserve and protect all of those things. But aside from that, I wanted to welcome you because we are very excited about the Kettering project that you've been a part of. This was a pilot project. We received funding from the Kettering Foundation to do this, and Barbara and I chose John to take the lead. But this is a mirror image of a process we ran here in the fall, and all the presidential libraries did. Over the fall, before the election, there were a total of 50 informational forums on different topics at all of the presidential libraries in the United States. So we ran 3 at the library and 3 here at the museum. They were on healthcare, energy, education, race relations. They were professionally facilitated. There were recorders, much as the process that you have used here. And we really think that when we signed on for this, we really think that this is a great illustration of President Ford's commitment to civic and civil discourse. And you might know the line, it's a direct quote from him. He said, "One can disagree without being disagreeable." And that's one of the core processes in this that we hope you'll take away, that one can share an opinion, have an opinion, but can also be open to listen to what others think. So we have been very supportive of this process and very, very excited about it. So we're glad that you're here tonight, and I have to slip out for just a couple minutes because we're finishing up a Foundation Executive Committee meeting, but then I will be back. And I'm really interested to hear what you all think about these topics. I sat through all of the forums at both sites and really learned a lot and was just really impressed with the way the attendees, and they ranged from individuals your age to very senior citizens, and there were both experts and lay people in every one of the audiences. And it was really interesting to have people weigh the choices. These are very complex issues, and we'll be interested to hear what you think about both the process as well about this particular issue. So I'll be out for a few minutes, but then I'll be back and enjoying the program. So thanks a lot for being here and for participating with us in this. John, back to you.
Next, we will have the Director of Education, Barbara McGregor, say a few words.
Thanks for coming today. What I'm going to do is just take a minute to put this program in a little more specific context for you. As Elaine said, we've been involved with the National Issues Forums and holding forums with varied groups here at the museum, actually since 1983. The Ford Library and Museum have been involved with Kettering in the National Issues Forums since the forum's inception in 1983. About a year and a half ago, the Kettering Foundation approached the Ford Library and Museum about running a pilot project with high school teachers and their students using the deliberative dialogue process with their students in the classroom. They asked us to put together a proposal for this research project. The end result will be a manual and some audio visuals to go along with it that other presidential libraries and museums and sites around the country can use if they want to do a program similar to this with high school teachers and students in their area. Just very brief background on the Kettering. It's been around since 1927. Initially set up for scientific research, but back in the 60s and 70s they realized they could use research methods with things other than science and started branching out into civic topics, public interest topics, social issues. And the National Issues Forums are what sprang from that, and those deal with the current issues, more contemporary issues of public interest and concern that we're dealing with now. With this pilot project, we really had 6 goals. First, obviously, to train the teachers in how to use the deliberative dialogue process with their students. Second, to assess what the teachers learned from that training and from using it with their students. Again, it's a pilot project, but Kettering does research projects. It's not just kind of a fun thing. All of their projects are research-based. Third, to assess how it met the needs of teachers, or if it met the needs of teachers, or if Kettering needs to do something different with their training than they do with the general population when they're dealing with teachers. Fourth, what students learned about National Issues Forums and if the process works for them. How the experience is valuable for the Ford Presidential Library and Museum. And then finally, as I mentioned, the manual that we'll use at other sites around the country. What makes this project unique and what makes doing the forums at presidential libraries unique, because really you can do them anywhere. General populations do them in churches and study groups and libraries and dens at home and just about any place you can think of. But what makes it different when you do it at a presidential library is that we have the stuff of history. We have primary materials, documents and artifacts that can be related to the subject being discussed. When it comes to the energy topic that the students did this year, Dr. Sampson did some research at the library in Ann Arbor into both documents and audiovisuals. He sifted through some 800 political cartoons and came up with 8 dealing with energy that he's copied for all the teachers participating. And they can use those materials, those primary materials, from the Ford administration and from our holdings with the deliberative dialogue in the classroom and do some comparisons. You know, students can bring in contemporary political cartoons on energy. You know, you can compare them. You can make your own contemporary political cartoons. So we're unique in that we can start introducing people more to the primary sources that are kind of the background of a lot of the topics that we're discussing. We had 7 teachers volunteer for the training, 3 from Southeast Michigan and 4 here from West Michigan, 2 from Grand Rapids Public and 2 from Kentwood Public Schools. And we did all the training together, and then Dr. Sampson went around the state and observed all the teachers using it in the classroom. And then we decided, instead of trying to transport students back and forth across the state, we'd be doing 2 of these wrap-ups. We did one yesterday in Ann Arbor with the students from Ann Arbor and Jackson schools, and then we're doing this one today. The final part of this project then, after we do the wrap-up today, is Dr. Sampson will be working with Sharon Yench, and they'll be putting together the manual that others will be able to use. So that's just a little background on the project. I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Sampson now, who will get us going into the real interesting meat of the program.
All right, the first thing we want to do is we talked about this, we did it yesterday and found it to be very advantageous. And because this is stage up here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a portable mic, have the teachers, each one of them, kind of summarize what they learned from the process, strengths, weaknesses, and how they looked at the deliberative dialogue. And then after that, we'll go into a mini forum. Walt, you get to go first. You want to do it from there, or you want to come up here?
I'm fine with you.
Okay, go ahead.
You guys hear me? Going back over what we repeated, I think it was John had mentioned, had I had this to do over again, I think I would have done it in our first trimester. I got a little sidetracked because GRPS went through a lot of changes this year. This was our first year in trimesters. We had a lot of within building changes. We had a lot of master schedule issues. So the one thing I would have done different was I would have started this off right away. But because of some other issues within the organization, I got sidetracked. I would not do that again. The other thing that could be changed, and I shared this with John earlier, was some of the writing and the citations within the book that we used were a little difficult to keep students on task. And if we could somehow, make that known to those folks in future publications, you might, reorganize, put academic credentials in a bibliography or something of that nature, because these poor students, 11th, 10th, 11th graders are reading this and they're just like, when do we get to the meat? And we're reading credentials. What went well? I teach alternative ed. And my kids have issues. All kids have issues. My kids especially sometimes have some issues. And to me, the best thing about this was it took students who are told, shut up, your opinion doesn't matter, and got them into a forum where they were able to formulate an opinion and voice an opinion. And then going back to some teacher talk, the other thing that really came out for me was these students, as I said, they're often typified. I have to work very hard. I'm often undoing 10 years of what's been instilled in some of these kids. But what especially went well was I got them engaged, forgive the teacher talk, higher order thinking. Forgive me for being cliché and reverting back to Bloom's taxonomy, but these kids were actually thinking on a level they don't normally think on. And other than that, I got colleagues engaged once this happened. That was very interesting, and once I actually did get this off the ground, I think about an hour later I was emailing John for more information.
I'm Catherine Logston. I work at Union High School. I did it with my one class. I did start first trimester. What I liked best probably is that it was a very structured program, and for our students at Grand Rapids Public School, the more structured the better. And I had it with my AP kids, and I gave them each a section, and they liked many things about it. They liked the fact that they could have an educated opinion and sound smart. They also liked the fact there were different opinions, and they also liked the fact that nobody was wrong. So they liked a lot of the program. The books are excellent. The kids, they were short sections, so they did read them. They did actually understand them. It went very well. So I really don't have any, objections or anything bad, because everything went really, really well. And I think you'll see that with these young ladies when they present later. But anybody have any questions for me? I think it was a great program.
I'm Lindsay Cohn, and I'm from East Kentwood High School. I teach world history there, and this is Troy Vanderlaan. He teaches at the freshman campus. He teaches U.S. history. We're both also involved in some extracurricular things at the high school. For me personally, I really enjoyed the program. Don't have a lot of complaints. I think my students enjoyed it. They learned a lot. I think they really liked, just like you guys said, the idea that they can have an opinion. I sat back. I didn't talk. I just kind of prompted the conversation, but they felt free to say whatever they liked. And they felt almost adult-like about it because they had the facts, they had the figures, they felt, empowered, exactly, or enabled to do it. And that was a great feeling for me as an educator to give that to them. I was fortunate enough to get some political cartoons from John, so my experience was a little bit different maybe from you guys, because I prompted or prepped it with using those political cartoons from Ford Museum, or Ford Library, sorry. And that helped a lot because we could talk about, and I even had kids bring in current event political cartoons and relate that, because a lot of them have to do with oil and gas and everything that was going on. So that certainly was helpful. And you know, we were a little confined during the energy crisis, so I tied it, teaching world history, into the Industrial Revolution and talking about this new eco-revolution and the green revolution that's going on. And that, of course, made the kids interested. I mean, you can open the paper any day of the week, and this is being talked about. I mean, the Grandpa's Press just had the wind turbine on top of the middle school or whatever just the other day, and I thought, oh, how great, you know, current event articles all the time. So for them to be able to flip through a newspaper and talk about it with their parents and come back to class was really a great thing. It was a great experience. My only complaint with the trimester, it's a little difficult. You know, trying to get kids back here tonight, you lose a lot of those kids, and it was hard getting them back to be able to go through it and talk about it for tonight, but and I did mine second try, and that was a little bit difficult too. I would have liked to have done it earlier, so it was fresh in my mind. But getting planning and getting the new year started can be a little difficult.
Yeah, it's basically, I could say ditto with all of this stuff. I think the biggest thing is the difference in the levels of learning styles that freshmen carry into a dialogue and the styles that a senior or a junior or a sophomore even. And at the freshman campus, I had a chance to do with 2 of my classes, and then also with a group of young men and young women. And yes, young men and young women, because we only had one gentleman with this. And it's a pretty big difference between how my freshmen interact with each other and how my juniors and seniors interact with each other. And I think that I love the program. In the pilot program, you learn a lot of things out of this because it's the first time we do it. And what the pros and cons, I could say the same thing everyone else said. And to keep it short, what I would like to see is in the material itself, maybe some more strategies for the teacher on how to relate the topic to a freshman and maybe how to relate the topic to a senior. And not that I want to water it down, I'm not saying that, but in a sense, maybe some different type of worksheets and strategies to build what's in the book before we run through a deliberation process. But other than that, I think it's a great program, and I would like to see more of it also. So, sure.
One other thing that I liked about it is that you had these books for the students that the Kettering Foundation puts out, and they're full of information, but in the very back, there's a summary page of all the topics that are discussed, and it was very useful. So if you don't have 3 weeks to spend on a topic, you can simply give it out to the kids the day before, maybe say, as a homework assignment, review this. We're going to have a form tomorrow in class, maybe put them on the spot, and they have all the simple facts right there laid out for them, very, very well organized. So, I mean, that's convenient, and that's another thing I liked about it. So, any questions? All right.
Thank you, guys. One thing that when they talked about the booklet, at the very end of the booklet is a questionnaire. And students fill out the questionnaire. They're gathered. Then they're sent off to Dayton, Ohio, the Kettering Foundation, where they tally all the information, and they do a report out to the public once a year. So that's one thing about all these booklets that come about. What we're going to do now is similar that we did yesterday in Ann Arbor. We're going to have a mini forum. We have 4 great young ladies that Mr. Van Loan has here, and we'll do it on stage. And what we're going to do, normally, yesterday I had a student work as a recorder. I'm going to have one of the teachers do this, and I had a student act as the moderator of one of the teachers do that, read the information. Then the kids will interact. What was kind of interesting that when we all went through training, as a moderator and as a recorder, you're not supposed to talk, which is a challenge. And as we went through training last August, we all learned that that was a lot harder than we thought it was. for a teacher and educator who's doing those roles not to get involved in a very active discussion. So that happened yesterday. One of the kids was a moderator, and he started talking, and everyone looked and said, no. We all chuckled. He chuckled too that he wasn't supposed to talk. But so would the four ladies come on up on stage, please? And Mr. Vanderlaan, you're going to be the first moderator. And which one of the three of you would like to be the first recorder? We changed this on each particular topic, or each approach. You guys want to spread out a little bit, or do you want to be? I would like to be close. I mean, if you want to, go ahead.
Okay. So we do kind of have a mini forum here. And again, this is a pilot. This is what we have to keep in mind. We're hoping as we get more practice with this, we can fill this up and we can have another 4 or 5 chairs up here all filled with a nice demographic of our student body in Grand Rapids together. But we'll work towards that because this is just a pilot. But to open it up, we're looking at something that is impacting our daily lives and impacting our nation, impacting world trade, globalization as we speak. And that's exactly what we have, everything, and basically what we're using right now is energy all around us. And we're comparing 3 approaches. We chose this energy problem. We could have had a choice between 4 or 5 different, I think, other topics. We chose the energy problem just because it affects us, and it's going to affect Michigan. And the way the economy is, we're hoping to use energy to bolster our economy right in the state and provide jobs one day for students graduating out of Kentwood and Grand Rapids and then out of a university. But to start out with the issues guide and comparing these approaches.
Gas, when we did this, was $4 a gallon.
Yeah.
Last fall, so that was the reason why this became the topic.
Yeah. Yeah, it was something that was very to value what we were dealing with. Still is. Yeah. Gas prices will go up when the economy goes up and the market goes up. American energy policy is nothing if not short-sighted and self-indulgent, writes columnist Robert Samuelson. The hallmark of U.S. energy policy is a steadfast refusal to confront choices. The underlying problem is that we don't agree on what the crux of the nation's energy problem is. But it appears there's a growing agreement that it is time to face some of those choices. Many signs now point to a crisis when it comes to energy. At the very least, there is a decision to be made, and made now. More than 400 separate pieces of energy-related legislation were before Congress in June of 2006. The United States Supreme Court is considering a case that would classify carbon dioxide as an air pollutant, subject to regulation. Many nuclear power generation facilities are nearing the end of their life expectancy, and we need to decide whether to build more. Right now, more than half of our energy comes from foreign sources. Some say this is a strategic mistake. Not all of these foreign sources of energy wishes us well. Many are in unstable parts of the world. Others say that this reliance on foreign energy blinds us to other consequences of dependence on fossil fuel. They say that the signs of human-caused climate change are all around us and accelerating. Some say that new technologies will provide the answer, but experts say that this is really just wishful thinking. The choice we face is not as easy as asking what type of energy source we would like to use. The options involve significantly different futures because they are rooted in different understandings of the problem. All of them mean that fundamental changes are in store. The real question is this: what is the most pressing issue when it comes to energy, both today and in the future? This is a question on which there is little agreement. Most agree, though, that time is running out. Everywhere we look, we can see signs of exhausted systems, writes Paul Roberts in The End of Oil. Giving way to something new, it is time to ask collectively what kind of future we want for our society and how well we will listen or sustain it. This cannot be left to experts or political leaders alone. It's too important, and the answers will affect our daily lives too greatly, as well as those of our children and grandchildren. The public must have a voice in such a fundamental issue. We're going to start off with approach one, and the approach one is suggesting to reduce our dependence on foreign energy. The crux of the nation's energy problem is that we're dependent on energy sources from unstable, unreliable, and often hostile nations and regions. This is a threat to our national security, our way of life, and our independence. The energy crisis in the 1970s, the 1990s, and today, last summer, definitely, we're still facing that, resulted from hostile actions of one kind or another by nations who supply us. Meanwhile, there are tens of billions of barrels of oil here in the United States. It's time for us to reduce our dependence on foreign energy by relying more on domestic resources. What should be done? Who wants to start out with this one?
Okay. Hi. My name is Morgan, and for approach one, that's kind of the one that I mostly agree with in some ways, but in some ways there's things that definitely don't exactly fit. But for approach one, the reducing our dependence on foreign energy, it's a lot of our energy doesn't come from the United States. Even though we could definitely drill oil here, there's people that don't want us to drill, or people that are against drilling because of natural reasons, because it would upset habitats. But if something were to happen to the nations that we get our oil from, like Canada, Mexico, or Saudi Arabia, then we could lose our importation of oil altogether, and then we would be left with nothing. So we kind of, either way, will come up with nothing. So I think that we need to end up doing something that will not make us depend on energy as much, because on foreign energy and importing fossil fuels and oil from other foreign places.
Hi, I'm Danielle Dubé. I do not agree with approach one because a lot of people think, oh, well, all of our oil comes from the Middle East. Well, actually, the number one and number two suppliers of oil to the United States is Canada and Mexico. So if we cut off our reliance on them, they're our neighbors, so we can lose a lot more with them. And who knows, like to the extreme, it might result in a fight, and we don't want that. So.
Hi everyone, I'm Megan Cook. I also agree with Danielle. I do not think I don't like approach one, basically. And basically, we're all like connected. Sorry, I have to use both hands. Connected, and if one of us if we try to separate, it's just all going to collapse. And if we collapse, then there's going to probably be another war, and which is not good for us right now, as you see Michigan's economy.
Hi, I'm Guinevere, and I'm against approach one because if we drill in the United States on the wilderness and offshore areas, that will possibly damage a lot of homes of different animals and people's environment.
And also, if we do drill in Alaska, which is like the big talk, let's just take all the oil out of Alaska, it is predicted that if we take every drop of oil from Alaska, it would only last us 2 years. So why just waste 2 years of our time when we could be getting a better approach? Because that's what we'd have to do in the future anyway.
Okay, with just drilling from the United States, there's other sources of energy that we could use. Like, we could use natural energy. We could use hydroelectric energy. There's other sources that we could use. We don't exactly have to be dependent on the fuel from foreign countries.
So having some different views on approach one, some for and some against, what we're going to look at now is looking at trade-offs, some likely trade-offs, what we could do instead, or the trade-offs, what we'll be losing if we go with approach one. And we're going to then try and wrap up into the conclusion of approach one to move on to approach two. So anyone want to share?
Some trade-offs would be that we would, like as she said, we could go to hybrids and stuff instead, but we could not just do that. We'd have to do some drilling, and that could take away like the beauty of the coasts that we'd have to be drilling on, which could bring our economy down because people pay so much money for beach houses. You're not going to want a beach house if all there is in front of it is oil, like digging. So.
Okay, well, I'm not a flip-flopper here, guys, but I do want to say that there are some pros to this approach one. Is we do that oil drilling for 2 years. It gives us 2 years worth of oil, which is good, which we can also get our oil from our other countries also. So it increases our oil a little bit. And yeah, that's all I have right now.
Okay, so we gave our runabout here with approach one, and we have kind of highlighted some of the pros and cons and trade-offs. We're going to move to approach two, and to introduce approach two, Walt. How do you say? Approach two, then just introduction for Walt, would be to get the fossil fuel and some type of, would be, let's see, get out of using fossil fuel altogether, which would be wind energy and things of that nature. So using alternative resources.
I'll read this. According to approach two, as he mentioned, it gets us out of the fossil fuel predicament. The real and increasingly threatened problem we have to face is that long-term reliance on fossil fuels would result in severe damage to the environment. Only recently have we begun to understand the widespread and damaging effects of carbon emissions and how serious a threat global warming poses. A new generation of alternative energy sources can lead to a real long-term solution. This nation has only taken baby steps in that direction. Until we develop clean energy sources to the point where they provide most of our needs, we'll never solve the problem. And goes into examples of what could be done to solve the problems. Substantially increase direct government investment in alternative and renewable resources and energy. Okay.
No, you're fine. Sorry, that was kind of, okay. Sorry. Okay. Well, we should build nuclear power plants because in France, 78% of their electricity is nuclear power. And nuclear power, okay, so it does have wastes, but so does burning fossil fuels because America, like per person in 1998, each person by themselves gave off 20 tons of CO2, which is carbon dioxide. You guys probably know that. So that is like double like Germany and France. So 78% of our electricity, we should change to nuclear power plants.
Okay, well, I'm extremely against approach two because with nuclear power plants, it comes with waste. and the half-life on the nuclear is really long. And for us to be storing it at Yucca Mountain, which is in Nevada, it's very dangerous because from that nuclear waste we could have terrorist attacks, and which is a very high place for a terrorist to attack because it's nuclear waste.
In opposition to approach 2, there are a lot easier ways to take steps towards becoming more energy efficient, and this doesn't really apply to real world situations because nobody really pays as much attention to the nuclear power plants and other types of energy, but what the real solution would be more towards like more simple steps like using more energy efficient vehicles and that stuff, like instead of the power plant situation.
Also, sorry, Morgan. Yeah, I forgot 1 minute. Let me think.
Okay. So to approach 2, I agree that we should get off of the fossil fuels just because there are so many emissions that go into the air that don't help us, and they're not good for like the atmosphere or for us like humans. But there's other ways that we could do it besides like just leaving everything behind. Like we can't just quit on the dime. Like we have to take preliminary steps, to get there. We can't just stop it. There has to be things that we do to build up to be able, like we have to build cars that don't rely on fossil fuels, but then they'll be expensive. So we have to somehow make it so that they can be given to be produced at low enough cost, but yet still be efficient.
Well, they will be more expensive and less convenient right now, but in the long run, if the economy does reboost and gas goes back up to $4 a gallon, in the long run, we will be saving so much money.
Okay. I don't know if you've noticed, but the economy's not doing so great. So not a whole lot of people can really go and buy cars right now. And they'll be more expensive than a regular vehicle that runs on fossil fuels. And I mean, not everybody can go out and buy one because not everybody has the money to buy one at this time.
Yes, that's true. But it also does cost so much money to make oil refineries. So if we're going to keep our oil going instead of going to nuclear power plants, which, by the way, have no emissions like CO2 does, which is like from oil refinery, well then it would be saving money.
Okay, sorry. But it is more, it's not going to be, nuclear power isn't going to be more expensive, isn't going to be as expensive, as like wind power or solar power. That's expensive, and as Morgan says, I don't know if you've noticed, but our economy's not doing very well. We're in like a financial hole, or a recession. There you go. What else? Yeah, that's it.
Some of the likely trade-offs of this approach. People will need to buy different products, as the ladies has outlined, which may be more expensive and less convenient than present choices. New technologies, such as hydrogen fuel or high-efficiency solar power, will have to be supported by large amounts of government funding until they are thriving on their own and can give true competition to fossil fuels. We'll need to find a place to safely dispose of nuclear waste. And do excuse me, as far as speech goes, I had some work done today and the Novocaine isn't quite worn off yet. In opposition, renewable technologies while promising, are not yet fully viable and ready for widespread use. Our energy appetite is so large that a few alternatives will not make a dent. There's no adequate answer to what is going on about nuclear waste, and we should simply stop generating it. This approach ignores that there are real-world, simple, and effective steps, such as increasing energy efficiency, that can be taken right now and have been proven to work.
All right, the final approach, approach 3, is titled, I'll wait for Troy to get the paper flipped here so he can write it, is plain out reducing our demand for energy, okay? Until we start cutting back on our use of energy, finding ways to get along with less of it will never solve this problem. Using less energy, either by improving energy efficiency or through other means, is a sensible and prudent response that involves neither wishing the problem away nor destroying the countryside. But as a nation, we remain unwilling to accept restrictions on our freedom to continue our big energy lifestyle. Even though it will require major changes in how we live, we've got to curb our appetite and learn to live on less energy. So ladies, as Americans, we love everything big and grand. Is this possible? Do you agree or disagree? Who wants it first?
Okay. In my opinion, this is the best approach we can take because, well, I think it's more effective. Like for approach 1, we'd have to reduce our dependence on other foreign countries. And if we break that bond with that country, they might want to go to war. So with approach 3, we won't have to break that bond, and we can still get our oil. And with approach 2, we have to use other fossil fuels, and they're really expensive, and some create waste, like nuclear power, which is inefficient to me, and just ready for a terrorist attack anywhere. And with this, we can just do like little things like ride bikes and like carpool and turn off lights when we're not using them, and computers when we're not at home. But I think it's more efficient.
I agree. I like approach 3 because all the other things that we would do, I mean, they would take time. But if all of us walked home right now, that would be an instant change. Like this can happen so quickly. And think about it, like people would start getting more exercise, walking to school, and we'd have to like making campaigns, like it would be kind of like more expensive like to stop this stuff because then the economy wouldn't be getting all the money that we buy for like dishwashers and fridges for our electricity. But it would be like what we need to think about is like right now. We can't think 10 years ahead because what happens when we run out of oil in 5 years? That we have to be thinking in the present. And right now the fastest approach to go is just to reduce our demand.
I am for approach 3 because if we increase our public awareness, then we can make sure that everyone knows that what they're doing will help, and it may not seem like taking little steps will help the big picture, but that is exactly what it takes, and if everyone does their share, then it will decrease the energy problem a lot faster.
Although I agree with approach 3, we live in America, and people like to be self-centered, and they like to do what's best for them. And like Ms. Cohn already has said, we like it big, and we like to have the fancy car and the big house. And you would have to get every person to give up their nice car that maybe they worked a little while to get that money for, well, a long while to get that money for. And you would have to get them to give up all of their luxuries that they have just to do it for other people. And I personally don't believe that people would do something like that for other people even though it will affect the big picture, it's not quite doable to me because, like I've already said, I believe Americans are kind of selfish. And if they're not going to get what they want, then nobody else is going to get anything because it's hard to get people to understand that if you give up something, it's good for everybody and not just yourself.
in America, we do enjoy big things, but we're not talking about completely giving up. We could still have fancy cars that are hybrids. You know what I mean? Not everything has to be oil and gas and all electricity. I mean, we don't have to completely give up those things. We just have to reduce it. And she's saying that she doesn't think that Americans will be willing to do this. But if we spend as much money as we would on electricity, because we're going to be reducing it, if we spent that money on campaigning, like think about how much money we spend on drunk driving campaigns. Spend half of that on conserving energy campaigns, and it could be done very quickly.
To what she just said about campaigns, the Ecofriendly campaign has been going on at least since I've started high school, or since I've started in the fall at school, and I haven't seen any change. Everything is, okay, so you buy a t-shirt that's 100% recyclable, or a bag that's 100% recyclable, and everything's recyclable, but it's not helping. Like, we have this campaign about being eco-friendly and trying to save the environment and get rid of fossil fuels and all that, and it's not changing anything. It's been going on for a long time, and nothing's changed.
Well, like you said, people in America like things big, which is why we need bigger campaigns for it. Sure, we have bags and shirts that are recyclable, but we can make so many more things. And you may not see it right now, but we live in the medium city of Grand Rapids, and places like Detroit and stuff that we don't see every day. They will benefit from things that we will do.
I somewhat agree with both of what you're saying. It's just that those campaigns, those big campaigns, they get very ubiquitous. Oops, I just said my word wrong. Ubiquitous, excuse me, and repetitive, and it gets annoying to me at least. Like the Obama campaigns and the McCain and Palin campaigns. They're really repetitive, and people won't like it, and some might protest or rebel against it. I don't know. I would, in my opinion.
I think all it takes is everyone just turning off your computer when you go to school or work, just little things. That is what will make it. That's what I believe.
All right, I want to ask you guys about some of the likely trade-offs of doing this. If you're going to have people reduce their energy, we know people in America, we like our independence and our freedoms and to do what we want. How can we regulate this? One solution could be to increase, for example, taxes on gasoline. Some of you may drive or have your driver's license. I don't know how you feel about that. Another regulation could be possibly, or I guess, can they regulate people turning their lights off and unplugging things? I mean, can the government regulate that? I don't know. What do you think?
Okay, I think so, because one of the probably the biggest things is not shutting stuff off, as we all been talking about. So in schools, I don't know about in Grand Rapids, but in Kentwood, a lot of the rooms, if someone isn't in there, no movement for 5 minutes, the lights automatically shut off. And yes, that's more expensive right now, but imagine in the long run, which we need to be thinking about now, what we're going to do now for the long run. So imagine in the long run, all the money that we're going to be saving from electricity, because simple things like that. So that would be a trade-off, is it would be more expensive to have those automatic lights, but in the long run, which is always in the long run, that will be saving money.
Okay, to me that's kind of like a what if question. You're like, what if does this and that, and it doesn't really make sense to me, because right now we have to worry about what's happening now, in Michigan, our economy, and the energy crisis that's going on. It's not really, I don't know. Here you go, Margaret.
With the government regulations, people don't like to be told what to do. If you're going to tell them that they can only drive their car so many days a week for so many hours, they're not going to like it. And I will personally say, as I'm getting my license this summer, I will not personally like it, because I have been waiting for 16 years to drive. And when I get my license, I'm going to drive for a long time. And I can't wait. But I am telling you, 16-year-old children, teenagers, whatever you want to call them, they are excited, and they're going to get on the road, and they're going to drive. And they're not going to be told what to do, how many hours they can drive, or any of that. And they're just going to get upset, just like they do at school. We have to wear lanyards. people get so upset about having to wear our lanyards, and if you tell them how many times they can drive, how long they can drive for, they're not going to be happy.
I'm going to read quickly some of the oppositions to this argument of reducing our demand for energy. Americans will not stand for the huge price increases that would be necessary to alter energy consumption, which you ladies hit on. Any savings we may be able to eke out by turning down the thermostats will be so far overshadowed by population growth. It is overly optimistic to think that such gains in energy efficiency as were experienced in the 1970s and 80s are still possible. The easiest and lowest cost efficiency gains have already been achieved. You're welcome.
Thank you, Lindsay. What we would do normally, Troy's got the one up here, is approach 3. We'd go on and take approach 1, 2, and 3, and then we put together, the kids would say, okay, what is the common ground between the 3 approaches? What can you agree to? And that would be the coming together of a particular issue. What we're going to do, since I've told everyone at the other session we'd be done in 1 hour, we'll be done in 1 hour here. I want to have the students tell us what they felt they've learned before, how they felt about the way they discuss things, and after learning this deliberative dialogue process, and how that may have impacted their activities. Okay?
Before we did this, I did this in Miss Cohn's class. I was supposed to do it with Mr. Vanderlaan, but I was sick that day. And before we did this, I didn't really care. Like, it didn't matter to me. And I have to honestly say, it didn't really change my life. But it was really interesting to hear everybody else's opinion on what could be done and how things could change. And maybe, hopefully, in the future, sometime in my life, things will change. And I think it would be much better if things changed. And that's what I learned.
Before this, like, the only thing, like, when people talk about energy, the only thing that I would really think was, like, hybrid. Like, that was the only thing. Like I didn't really know about, like, having solar panels and wind turbines and all the other things we could do besides, like, it never even crossed my mind to just, like, reduce what we're doing instead of, like, completely cutting it out. And, like, I think now that some burning of fossil fuels is okay and then a little bit of hybrid, like, I think that it all just needs to come together into, like, one big one of, like, take a little bit of each and just take baby steps. So, yeah.
Hi. Before this, as Morgan said, I also did not really care. We talked about a little bit of this in, like, my debate class, but not much. But after we did the forum for mock trial with Mr. Vanderlaan, it actually, my view on the whole energy crisis and energy problem isn't so vague anymore. It's more control, and I actually have ideas of what we can do to help, and maybe it would work someday. As Dubé said, we can just combine all into one and make it, like, huge and take baby steps.
Well, this is my second time, like, doing this ever, but I really like how you can learn different people's perspectives and there are different viewpoints that don't necessarily agree with you, and I think that the forum's idea is just very good to get people educated and to help make a difference, because we are the next leaders, and we will be around hopefully for the change and the energy to be solved.
Thank you, ladies. You did a great job. Normally what we did then was have a few moments for if anyone had questions in the auditorium, the groups. And one thing that was brought out in one approach one of the teachers used was have kids write a paper of each of the approaches to see how they would support one, whether it's approach 1, 2, or 3. As Lindsay pointed out, I'd given her some preliminary editorial cartoons, and so she had worked with the students in that. Lindsay?
Issue I had just made a general statement, is global warming an imminent threat? Use the information you've learned, and that was their ACT prep writing practice. It was very, very good.
Thank you. Does anyone have any particular questions, or if not, yes?
This would be to the Grand Rapids teachers, and I had to leave, do some district business. But having been trained in this process, how do you see it fitting in with the effort-based education and the Institute for Learning that the district is going through?
It provides a very good organized structure to use in the classroom, and I think fits right into that particular initiative.
Do you see passing it on to the other teachers in the district? And
Other social studies teachers, yeah.
just social studies?
Well, I think they're best trained, frankly, for this sort of forum and for this sort of information. But at least of the packages we saw, almost all of our social studies issues are civic
Well,
issues.
I'm looking at the process, because you can apply the process,
Yeah.
and that's basically what you got trained in, right? Was the process.
Correct. There's a little bit
Because you
of
can use it in language arts, math, when you do proofs in geometry or whatever. I mean, you could see in
Right.
civics, again,
And it gives them the nice 3 bold choices with some already concrete facts in each of the 3 areas. And there really is no right or wrong answer, which was also really nice. And the kids really appreciated that part of it. Not seeing there wasn't a right or wrong necessarily. They liked to speak that, didn't they?
I think it's important for kids to realize that you can have different opinions
Right.
without, again, you can disagree without being disagreeable. And I think it's important for all our children in this society nowadays where it seems to be slam, bang, dunk.
And you can do with a big class. We have 4 up here, but I use the same type of methodology in my U.S. history class, whether or not America should get involved in the Spanish-American War, 1898. And the kids got into it. And I had in one class, I had, I think, 29, and another one around 30. And we sat in a big circle and we went through this process. They got involved. They were excited about it, and they still followed the rules.
And I observed Troy's classroom doing that Spanish-American War.
But even the shyest kid had something in front of them, so they felt comfortable. And we have a lot of kids who are very shy or don't have time in our district, and they had this right in front of them, and they felt comfortable with that, having that information. And empowered is the best word I can think of.
Yeah, when I spoke earlier, I think one of the ways I would phrase it is a lot of our kids have, at least the ones I have, I'll tell you that, have a fear of being shut down. And this, that fear was gone. They moved beyond it.
And it helps bridge, and you can start building a relationship as soon as they feel that they're regaining some self-esteem.
I would concur that because yesterday, as we watched the discussion between about 6 kids from Alternative High School in Jackson and a private middle school in Ann Arbor, and how kids, the respect and the talking back and forth it was a delight that we didn't know what we were getting into. We had 3 different types of levels and 3 different types of school settings, and the kids stepped forward. And kids who, when we got done, I know that Barb and Elaine, they talked to different kids, and then we complimented the kids on how well they did. And you could tell the beam in the eyes of some of those kids who don't hear that on a regular basis because they're not in a setting where everyone was on equal footing. And that was really kind of a neat experience through that. And these young ladies did a fantastic job this afternoon. So I'd like to give them another round of applause. Thank you for coming, and have a great evening, and enjoy the nice sunshine outside. And refreshments. Barbara would like you to eat as much as you want to eat.